Well, we will leave you to your meditation. Let us determine just what we have found here. Let us pour liquid from the bottle into a test tube to perform an analysis. This a colorless, water-based liquid. Quite a strong floral aroma.
Holmes? What are you doing?
It has a bitter taste.
What if it's poisonous?
Did you ever see poison stored in enormous jars like that? Anyway, there is a doctor nearby.
So what do you think it is?
It is some kind of organic compound. Let us vaporize the liquid and see what happens. Small colorless crystals. Colorless, tiny crystals that are soluble in water, with a floral smell and a bitter taste. Watson, could you pass me that small bottle, please?
Of course. Here you are. Holmes, do you know what it is?
Wagner's reagent. There was a label on the bottle that you passed to me.
No, Holmes, I meant the bottle that we found.
Let me add the reagent and see if there is any sediment, and then I shall tell you. I need to take a I need to... Red sediment, just as I suspected. This liquid is of organic origin. It contains some alkaloid. Most likely it is unstable, and that is why there is a quantity of gold dust to prevent contamination. This mixture is probably a fertilizer. Someone was carrying out unusual experiments in the garden's laboratory. This substance is an alkaloid, the same.
Holmes, Albert Dunn didn't give us the...
It does not. Open. Martin Hamish's locker. A review on rare and exotic plants. Martin Hamish has written several pieces. Father and I, Kew Gardens. Martin Hamish studied Albert's lock. Specialist articles on shipyards and ship construction. Albert Dunn has a great passion for shipbuilding and the sea. A rejection letter from the British Royal Naval College. A picture of Miss White and Albert in front of the University of London.
And they seem to get along.
Miss White's locker. A draft of the letter that Miss White sent to her parents. Apparently, Miss White is a capable student. These jewels must... A vanity purse. It is of high quality. Perfect, Watson. We can begin our experiment.
This green, grand, mystic fellow seems rather suspicious, Holmes. What should we do next, Holmes?
I imagine that one of these plants would be capable of releasing a toxic vapor. I need to find out exactly how it could be done. I shall begin now. Watson, if you are at all optimistic to have dinner this evening, then I'd recommend that you put on the gas mask. This I find the behavior of predators utterly fascinating. It appears to have fallen inactive after being disturbed. How interesting. What a strong and effective defensive mechanism. It appears to open after being soaked with alkaloid. It closed again. I believe I saw a small cloud of gas. I wonder what secrets this plant is hiding. Perhaps if we agitate it to a greater extent whilst it is opened, it will reveal a little more. I am interested in what might occur if the prickly plant should shoot at it. My word! It shot a spike at me after I stabbed it with a pin. I imagined that its reaction would be ferocious if I increased the strength of my attack. How interesting. I am interested in... This plant seems to have had... My... Toxic gas with spores. Extraordinary. The plants would be capable of killing only if they were directly next to the victim and stimulated at precisely the right moment.
Let us take our caterpillars to the Colonial Collection Room. We may see things more clearly there.
It is too early, Watson. Our suspects will be there. Let us investigate Kew Gardens one more time and ask some questions. Mr. Hamish, was someone from your family connected with Kew Gardens?
Family? No. I'm the only one with a passion for botany.
I do not think so. This photograph of you and your father at Kew Gardens suggests the opposite.
But you have no right to.
Do tell us more about your father.
He was, indeed, the greatest botanist of his time in the British Empire. He worked together with Montague Dunn until the end of his life. He brought me in at the age of 12.
Did he get on well with Mr. Dunn?
No, I couldn't say that. They expanded Kew Gardens together, that was all. And it was all my father's work, for Dunn always lived the high life.
So Mr. Dunn was not helping your father?
Oh, yes, he provided the financial support. And as far as he was concerned, that fulfilled his role. But the worst of it was, he declared himself as the master of Kew Gardens. Fame meant nothing to my father, so it was easy for Mr. Dunn to take all the credit.
Can you tell me if you saw Mr. Montague Dunn on the day of his death?
Yes, of course. I met him, and we went to see Albert, his son, at around 9:30. He appeared quite calm.
What were you doing on the morning of the accident?
After paying multiple visits to Albert, I had a little talk with Miss White. Then I returned to my desk to complete some paperwork. Suddenly I observed that Mr. Dunn was not feeling well, so I ran immediately to fetch Albert. I clearly remember that it was around 10:30, for I was late that morning.
Thank you, Mr. Hamish. We shall continue our investigation. Can you tell me what Mr. Dunn was doing upon the day of his death?
I can, but there is nothing very special to say. I was in the laboratory when I saw Mr. Dunn heading towards me. Tuesday is the day of his weekly visit. It was supposed to be at 9, but he was 10 minutes late, as usual.
And then?
Well, he came in to say good morning. Then I saw him spend 2 or 3 minutes by the plants outside the laboratory. After that, he ran out in the direction of the nursery, where Mr. Hamish was working. He was always in a rush during the inspection, you see. I would pity anyone who stood in his way.
And that was the last time you saw him?
Yes. I stayed in the laboratory until 20 minutes to 11, when I heard the cries of Albert and Mr. Hamish from the large glass house. I joined them as soon as I could, for I knew that something must be very wrong.
What exactly were you doing in the laboratory?
I was recording an experiment for my thesis. I only stopped my work once when Mr. Hamish visited me briefly around 10 o'clock.
You say you were recording an experiment when the tragedy occurred. Might I listen to the roll?
Certainly. Please do. You will find it in the laboratory. It is number 320.
Thank you, miss. Here it is. Cylinder.
These plants, classified as shrubs or grasses, have adapted to their arid environment due to a system of underground roots.
This recording seems very long. It is unnecessary to listen to all of it. Miss White was in the laboratory, as she told us. Your father's death does seem highly suspicious. What were your movements here on that day?
Suspicious? Well, I was working in the seed house, taking care of something, or Lear Pontus, or... No, wait. Ah, these Latin names. And I spent so many hours trying to memorize them.
Did you see your father that day?
Yes. He came here with Mr. Hamish for his weekly visit. There was nothing unusual about that.
And then?
Nothing. They stepped out to the backyard. It was perhaps 20 minutes before 10 o'clock. Then about 10 minutes later, I saw my father heading for the dry tropics room while Mr. Hamish returned here.
And Mr. Hamish and Miss White, what were they both doing that morning?
Mr. Hamish visited me a couple of times. I also saw him returning from talking with Miss White, and that was at 10 minutes past 10. But then he ran back here to me to tell me that my father was feeling unwell. We hurried across to the water lily room, and I found my father lying dead on the floor. Oh, my God.
I perceive that you are passionate about the Royal Navy.
Passionate? No, not really. I like ships, that is all.
Are you quite sure? You do not seem to be so interested in plants.
It's difficult, that's all. My future is here. It has never been about anything else.
And yet I know that the Royal Naval College rejected your application.
Ah, you truly are as clever as they say. Yes, that's correct. And in fact, my father was strongly against the idea. He did his best to ruin my plans, although I almost did succeed. But my dreams were shattered, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, young man. We shall see you again soon.
Everyone has gone, Holmes. The way is clear.
When Montague Dunn was standing close by the plants, the caterpillars were released and caused the deadly spores to activate. Panicking, and likely already half asphyxiated, Montague Dunn started back and knocked over the bust. He rushed to the door, but it was locked. He had to force it open with his shoulder. We already know the outcome. Montague Dunn collapsed and died not far from the pool. Well, it is time to perform our experiment on the ventilation system. The caterpillars could only fall from the ventilation duct. Our caterpillars are in place. I'll activate the ventilation system so that they fall down. Watson, stay here and observe.
All right, Holmes.
The power is off. The engine cannot be... The engine... The ventilation system is working.
Now we need to see if we can activate the fans from...
Excellent. This ventilation fan is working. Perfect. Now I just...
It works perfectly, Holmes. Bravo. Now, if you could just help me to get rid of these caterpillars.
Perfect. Now we know how the murder of Montague Dunn was carried out, by activating both Albert's and Mr. Hamish's fans.
But only from Mr. Hamish's workplace would it be possible to see when Montague Dunn entered the Colonial Collection Room.